The APCD hearing board will come to order. We have a case before us tonight, Dos Quadras Offshore Resources, LLC, for a regular variance. Before we start the proceedings, Mr. Herlock wants to make a statement.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, after I received the petition and had a chance to review it, I had some concerns which I expressed to our counsel, Mr. Oriano, and he suggested that I could express these directly to APCD staff as long as I made a statement to that effect at the beginning of the hearing. So I did that. The nature of my concerns were that in the petition, the petitioner gave ample explanation of what the harm would be to the petitioner if there was if the variance was not accepted and we had to shut down. But there was the other side of that question was what would be the benefit to the district and the public of shutting down the operation. And I thought that was not adequately addressed in terms of giving the board enough information to weigh those two sides. And so that was basically the content of my concern.
Thank you, Mr. Herlock. Okay, I'm going to start over. The hearing board is going to come to order now at 5:30 on the 1st of June, not 2015. And I see that all the board members, Mr. Carmen, Mr. Herlock, myself, Dan, and Dr. Are all here. So we're going to be hearing petition number, where it's 857 today. Will any representatives of the applicants who are planning to offer testimony tonight please rise to be sworn in?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Would the petitioner like to state your case?
Yeah, good evening, everyone, and members of the board. My name is Alex Steim.
Sir, can you talk a little more loud? There you go. Thank you.
My name is Alex Steim. I am a senior regulatory affairs specialist. I took Christine White's job. She retired. She was here last time for the interim variance. I'd like to introduce, and you know, Mr. Bob Garcia. DECOR's Vice President of California Operations is here tonight, and Ms. Emily Homan, DECOR's facility engineer who's in charge of the MOSF engineering. And we have another gentleman in the audience who works for DECOR. He's Mr. David McDermott. He's a DECOR senior attorney. I'd just like to start off by just going over a few of the items that I know you've already heard, but this will be a brief summary of what you've heard to date with some additional information which will address the question that was the comment that was posed earlier when we began. On March 23rd, DECOR was granted an interim variance to continue operating a flare at Mandalay onshore facility. In order to achieve compliance with the permitted NOx emission limits of this flare, DECOR is requesting that the hearing board now grant a regular variance. The granting of a regular variance will provide DECOR with the minimum amount of time that we need to modify the piping that's located on platform Gina. And once we modify that piping, this will bring the flare into full compliance again. The Mandalay onshore facility, also known as MOSF, is located near the Mandalay power plant. MOSF processes oil and gas produced from platforms Gina and Gilda. MOSF has a produced gas treatment system with an amine plant used for CO2 and H2S removal. The sweet gas is then sold to SoCal Gas Company. The waste gas from that amine plant is called tail gas, which is high in CO2 and therefore has a low BTU heating value. This tail gas is routed to the subject flare where it is commingled with supplemental PUC quality gas and then combusted in the flare. Since the tail gas has such a low heating value, it will not burn by itself without the supplemental addition of PUC quality gas. The results of the flare emission source test conducted in January showed that the flare was slightly out of compliance with NOx emissions. In order to achieve compliance with the permitted NOx emission levels, the volume of tail gas sent to the flare must be increased to lower the overall heating value of the combined gas stream being burned in the flare. To achieve this, piping changes on platform Gina are required to increase production from well H1, which is currently producing 300 to 400 MCF per day. Once these piping modifications are completed, well H1 will be capable of sending 1,200 to 1,600 MCF per day to the beach to MOSF. This will allow increased tail gas production from the amine plant, thereby increasing the ratio of tail gas to supplemental gas, resulting in an overall lower heating value of gas being burned in the flare, which will lower the NOx emissions to within the prescribed permitted limits. If you'd like, Ms. Homan can provide the board with the piping changes, the timeline that it'll take to make those changes, as well as a detailed process flow diagram which has been handed out. Emily can provide you with progress to date, project planning, equipment orders, pipings that's been fabricated, electrical materials that have been ordered, and the anticipated delivery dates of those materials. The piping modifications on Gina are anticipated to be completed on or before July 30th, 2015. Once these modifications are complete, the gas production has increased from Gina, an emission source test will be performed on the flare. The results of this test will be provided to the district on or before September 15th, 2015. Unless there's any questions at this point, I'd like to address the question which was previously raised by a board member with regard to item I of the variance petition. Item I requests that the petitioner describe the benefits to the residents of the district resulting from immediate compliance. I'd like to explain that, those benefits.
We can start with that, sure.
Okay. So immediate compliance would require that the subject flare be removed from operation. If this flare was removed from operation, oil and gas production from both platforms would be shut in until the flare was once again operational after the piping modifications were made on platform Gina. During this period of time, we feel that there would be virtually no NOx reductions gained from platform Gina shutdown. And this is due to the complexity of operating a shutdown oil and gas platform offshore California. The safety systems and personnel needed to man this facility will continue to potentially require flaring of any unsafe gases, emergency generator operation in case of power loss. The cranes will have to be used. The crew and supply boat operations will have to continue. This platform has, and this is just a note, this platform has a permitted emission limit of 387 pounds of NOx emissions per day. That's just potential to emit or permitted with everything operating out there. So in addition to that, there are fugitive emissions, reactive organic compounds, which will still take place from tanks and wellheads that we haven't included in the NOx conversation. Then on platform Gilda, it's very similar. The only emission reduction that we would see would be due to a shutdown of a uniflux heater. This heater is permitted at 0.14 pounds per hour of NOx or 3.36 pounds of NOx per day. And this note for this platform, it has a permitted emission limit of 300 pounds per day. So then we get to MOSF. MOSF emission reductions would occur due to a shutdown of the flare, and we're talking about 0.14 pounds per hour or 3.36 pounds per day. In addition to the flare, there would be an amine reboiler that has a 0.7 pound per hour or a 1.68 pounds per day emissions. And then there's 2 heater burners for the heater treaters, and those would result in a 0.24 pounds per hour or 5.76 pounds per day reduction. So the total estimated emission reductions due to the shutdown of all 3 facilities, which would be MOSF and the 2 platforms, is approximately 14.16 pounds per day of NOx. This is a tiny fraction of what the basin-wide emissions are. And we would look to the staff, the district staff, to explain how small that is compared to what the entire basin sees for NOx emissions. Just a point of reference, MOSF has a NOx permit limit of 91 pounds per day. So then, during this variance period, DECO will monitor the daily tail gas and supplemental fuel gas directed to the MOSF flare and will prepare a monthly progress report per the district's direction. And just another point of reference, from March 23rd through the end of May, the estimated excess emissions due to the operation of the flare out of compliance totaled 27.6 pounds of NOx emissions. And our 3 facilities are permitted for 780 pounds per day, just to give you a reference numbers. So we are basically asking for a regular variance that will cover this 0.75 pounds of NOx per day coming from the excess emissions from the flare.
Okay, Dr. Herlock, I assume you probably have.
Yeah, thank you very much for that analysis and summary that you put together. Just so I understand, so what I think I heard you say was that if the variance were not granted at this hearing, certain operations on both platforms would have to continue, and certain operations at MOSF would have to continue, and the result would be the result of the total emissions under those conditions compared with the total emissions during the variance is something like 14 pounds a day. Is that what
Yeah, that's correct.
about what you said? And I don't know what fraction that is of the stationary source inventory, but I imagine that staff can tell us it's a pretty small fraction. But that's the kind of thing I was looking for and would hope to see in future petitions, that so we can weigh shutting down versus not shutting down. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. We're glad to present that information, because the earlier information in that item I was, as you said, a little bit short.
It was. I thought it was non-responsive, but
Yes.
this is very responsive.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Do any other members of the board have any questions at this time? Okay, well, you have another
I
one?
do. I have another question.
All right.
This is another part of the draft. The petitioner has a copy of the draft order. I think we touched a little bit on this in the hearing for the interim variance, but on page 6 of the draft under item 2, just want to clarify that the second paragraph here says it was unknown that the low tail gas rates being supplied to the flare would result in an NOx emission exceedance. You see where I'm referring to? On page 6. I guess it seems to me that a knowledgeable person would have, I mean, you guys are pretty smart to figure out this workaround in the first place, and you know your operation, but it seems like you would know that you're going to end up burning that flare hotter than you had been because of the fact that you don't have as much tail gas and you have to add in PUC-type gas, and so it's going to burn hotter and give more NOx. Whether you have enough of a model of this that you could predict it was going to exceed, but you certainly must have known that it was going to increase the NOx when you changed, when you made the alterations to the operation. I guess there's a question in there somewhere.
I'm Emily Homan, facility engineer with Decor. Good evening. Because the flare was operating normally within normal temperature limits, we did not anticipate that we would have an issue with NOx at the time of the source test. Our production has never been so low, and so we've not seen this problem. But because our recording temperature shows normal temperature combustion ranges, we did not anticipate that we would have a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Do any members of the board have any further questions? Mr. Carmen?
Yes. Mine is mainly I'm kind of confused because we have two different numbers here. On the interim variance, page number 5, it tells you that on January 2015, you had an emission of 0.0739 output, and the difference was 0.039 of NOx per million BTU heat input. At the current flow rates, to flare excess of nitrous oxide emission will approximately be 0.3 pounds per hour or 7.16 pounds per day.
Could you say again the page?
It's page number 5. It's about the like a third paragraph on the interim variance. That's the one you received as a package on the report of hearing board on air pollution.
The interim, yeah.
And then when we have the, let's see, this was the May 28th Ventura County APCD hearing board. That's the last document we received. It says that, basically it says that on January 20, you show a nitrous oxide emission of 0.0739, and the difference was 0.039, but you show that the exit emission was 0.75 pounds per day. Well, if you compare with the previous one, it was 7.2 pounds per day, and the total instead of 22 pounds per month will be about 216 pounds per month. So that's a discrepancy that maybe you have a reason for using both values, but I'm not too clear why you use different values. Because it's substantial.
Mr. Carmen, just to repeat for clarity, in the interim variance on page 5,
Yes.
you're in the third paragraph down that begins with an emission source test conducted January 30, 2015, showed the NOx emissions were about 0.0739 pounds per million BTU of heat input. Is that
Yeah, I think
the
that's
paragraph to which you're referring?
Yes. An emission source, right. So it says 0.03 pounds per hour. If you put it that for 24 hours, you get a value of 7.2 pounds per day or 214 pounds per month. And then in this other report is 0.75 pounds per day and total 22 pounds per month.
Yeah. I found it. It's here too. This is the regular
That may
variance.
be something that the district has to explain the difference, because they drafted both of these.
Well, I want to table this for a minute. Do any board members have any other questions? Because if not, I'd like to ask the district to clarify the apparent difference in the math.
Well, I think we just have better numbers than we originally had to begin with.
Have the numbers what?
Better numbers. These numbers were taken from the monthly reports that they send us. And it's been averaging around 0.75 to 0.8 pounds per day. And I believe when we originally calculated it, we thought it was going to be higher. And
Well, the difference is
yeah.
10 times higher.
Yes, it is a lot different, but that's, when we were writing this draft order, and I saw that the number was quite a bit lower, 10 times lower, basically, you go from 7 to 0.7, we spoke to the engineer who works on these permits, and he went over the calcs with us, and we're confident of the calcs that we have on this order.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any members of the board have any other questions? Do any members of the board have any questions of the district?
I have another question.
Yes, sir.
This is, I'm curious to find out on the last page
Of,
the what's this, the notice of hearing, where we have this table.
okay.
If you go to the NOx, the value for the permitted emission was 2 pounds per hour. And then you come out, that's tons per year, a very small number that doesn't jive with the 2 pounds per hour.
Are you talking about the notice of hearing of April 27th or what?
But what, oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that was in here somewhere, I remember. Okay. Okay, could you start over, Mr. Carmen? Go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
Okay, the permitted emission for NOx is 2 pounds per hour. And then in the next column, it says it's 0.04 tons per year. Well, if you go backwards and bring that one in and everything for the hours, that's only 39 hours. It's very different from what you should be getting there.
Well, the district can correct me if I'm wrong, but my assumption is that there's a pounds per hour reading, but then there's just a maximum amount per year. That it doesn't have to be an exact multiple of that because maybe it's not operating sometimes.
No, that's not the case, because that 2 pounds per hour is based on a flow of 0.060.
When it's
That's the one
working,
that's
yeah.
permitted. If you 0.060 and you're using 33.5 millions BTUs per day, you multiply one with the other one, you get 2.01. So that's correct, 2.01.
pounds per hour, yeah.
Pound per hour. My question is whether you go to tons per year, because that's a very small number.
It's a good question. Does the district have an explanation for the apparent?
Well, I can tell you, generally speaking, when we permit any type of equipment, the pounds per hour is a maximum worst case scenario, based on the highest emission factors and on the thing operating at full time. Tons per year is generally based on a throughput limit, and it's quite common to have pounds per hour higher than the tons per year. Now, these particular numbers, I would have to go in and I would have to look at the permitted emissions for that particular piece of equipment. I'd assume that those numbers were right, but it's not uncommon to have pounds per hour that, like, very, very high, but like, for instance, there's another flare at the site that would have high NOx emissions in pounds per hour, but it's only has enough, the limit would only let it run for 8 days, so you really can't calculate the pounds per hour times 8760 to get a tons per year.
Well, but this one is based on this calculation, based on this number, you can only operate it 39 hours to get that 0.04.
Well, that would be 39 hours
At a rate of 0.06. So that's not even using the additional 0.0139. That's at 0.06. You can only operate it for 39 hours, and you get 0.04 tons per year.
Yeah, it's like I said,
that's a big discrepancy, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's common to have an engine, let's say, if 1,000 horsepower engine, and when you look at the pounds per hour is basically that engine running at wide open at 1,000 horsepower for a solid hour. But in practice, the engine may only run at half throttle or half load or whatever. So that doesn't surprise me. I'm looking at a summary of the various equipment at the MOSF. Let me see if I can find that on there. I'm hoping that those are correct numbers. It is possible that those numbers are wrong too, but those should be for the amine unit. Yeah, I show point. Amine reboiler. Maybe that includes the flare too. Okay, this is the 35 million BTU flare, and I'm looking at the equipment summary, which is what the district uses when they permit these, and this shows pounds per hour for that flare. It's the BEI enclosed ground flare at 2.01 pounds per hour, which is the same as that, and it shows the tons per year at 0.04. So that, I mean, these are these numbers match. So it's probably permitted based on 35 million BTUs, or based on 33.5 million BTUs per hour, but it may not operate anywhere near that. I'm not sure what the BTU hour rating is when it operates, but pounds per hour, that's a maximum worst case scenario.
Well, but there's no way around of this thing can only at 0.060, it can only operate 39 per hour, because that's
Well, that's if it operates wide open at the maximum capacity, but
well, that's what they're operating it. That's what they say. It's 0.060.
well, pounds per hour for the permitted emissions is a maximum theoretical number that's used, and generally speaking, equipment never operates at that level. It's possible that it could operate at that level, but it generally doesn't. It would operate at a much lower level. These are numbers that were used by the engineering division, the guys that issue all of the permits, so I'm sure that these are correct numbers. All I can say is when they operate the flare, they don't, the flare rating is capable of a lot more gas than it actually uses. And there's an annual there's an annual limit on Hang on just a sec. I'm actually looking at this. It is possible that these numbers are wrong.
Because when you have the
Yeah.
0.04 tons per year, you multiply it by 2,000, you get 80 pounds per year.
Right.
And 80 pounds, now that's 80 pounds that you can do total for a year. You're burning at 2 pounds per hour. So that gives you that only 40 hours. So let's say that if you say that's the maximum capacity, which in that case you say then the excess tail gas is also theoretically possibly much lower. But anyway, it should be then 40 hours divided by 2 for the pounds per hour. It gives you that you have less than 40 hours that you can operate at full capacity. Okay, you don't go full capacity, you're going to go half, 50%? Okay, you have 80 hours.
Yeah. What I'm looking at here is there's a program they use, and for this flare, normally, if you had a piece of equipment and it burned natural gas, you would calculate based on so many cubic feet of natural gas a year. Because this flare burns tail gas and it burns PUC gas, they actually have the calculation here 3 different times. Now, the worst case scenario for pounds per hour is 2.01. However, for the tons per year, it looks like we would add 3 different sets of numbers up for the tons per year, and I don't believe on this notice that was done. I can show you what we're basically talking about here, but there's one calculation for just the tail gas, and that's based on a quantity of tail gas that they expect to be burned for a year. There's another calculation for the bypass gas, and then there's another one which is I believe is for the mixture. So I would say the pounds per hour is right, but on this form on the notice the tons per year is wrong. That 0.04 tons per year is the tons per year only for the tail gas portion, and not for the regular gas portion. And it's possible that when that form was filled out, that the petitioner looked at a summary like this and just took the first set of numbers, which is only part of the story. So I have to apologize. Pounds per hour is right on this form, but the tons per year is wrong. I don't have a total in front of me, but I do have this, and it shows the tons per year for basically 3 different types of gas. And because of the fact that the flare burns more, it doesn't just burn natural gas. They have a program, and it has to calculate each different kind of gas that it burns there.
Dan, I have a question, 2 questions,
Okay.
because I think Mr. Carmen makes a good point.
Oh, yeah.
So the first question is the gas analyzer that's utilized to detect the level of NOx in the stream of tail gas coming out, it's not just doing spot checks sporadically, it's measuring it real time, all the time, and there's a cumulative total on a meter that's stored in memory.
There's a meter, I
In other words, you
believe.
can look at it and see what it's doing right now, but you can also look and see how much say NOx, for example,
I
has
don't,
been,
I don't think they have a real-time NOx monitor out there. Do you have a real-time NOx?
No, we don't have real-time NOx.
Yeah, we're.
okay, well, that leads to
we're-
my second question then.
Okay.
How would you know whether the tons per year limit, whatever it might actually be, was exceeded or was under the threshold?
Well, we're here because it failed a source test. They have a source test that they actually hire a company, and the company brings a van out, and they do an official source test, kind of like if
Okay.
you take your car to get it smogged.
Yeah.
And that's the data that they use to
Well, that's why I'm
determine-
asking, because I
And
did this kind of
and
stuff on
then
cars.
tons per year are basically calculated based on the worst case emissions and the total permitted throughput for the flare. So there is a calculation that's done. We don't necessarily enforce the tons per year. We actually enforce the throughput limits.
Okay, my final, this is not a question, it's just a comment.
Sure.
As I don't have to tell any officer of the APCD here that we are, while we're in compliance with federal NOx standards, we have not achieved compliance with state standards. So NOx is kind of a big deal,
Yes, that's true.
and it's an ozone precursor.
Yes.
So this would seem to me to be a serious statistical or measurement error if this is common.
Well, I don't believe there was an error in the pounds per hour, but I would say that the tons per year are not.
Well, but you
correct.
said this tons per year is probably incorrect.
Yes.
I mean, do you mean just a typo, or
Well,
you compared it to some existing table and said, yeah, it reads the same,
Yeah.
but it's still wrong?
this is taken from the petition, right? Yeah, so I didn't fill the petition out.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I have to apologize. We didn't catch the fact that the tons per year were wrong.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy?
This is for the district also, that in reference to the petition section I, where they were supposed to describe the benefits to the residents of the district, that one of the difficulties I suppose that you have is obviously if you are going to keep the thing running, that it's going to produce more NOx emissions than they would have if they didn't run it, typically. But it's hard so a lot of times it would seem like there isn't any particular benefit to the district in not running it other than the economic detriment that would befall the company and their employees and the county, et cetera, taxes, et cetera. But it would seem like there should be some way for the petitioner to show that the detriment, at least, is what the legal term is called de minimis, meaning it really doesn't make a difference. So because they're adding 0.75 pounds per day, and if the district would have a chart showing district-wide how many pounds of NOx are going on, then they could show, in comparison, this really doesn't make any difference whatsoever.
I can tell you what the emissions are district-wide in tons per day.
Yeah.
That was a question that had been asked previously, not for this company, but I know that was a question that had been asked. And based on the inventory from 2012, which is the most current inventory that we have, in Ventura County, from all man-made sources, that doesn't include, trees and everything, it's 43.57 tons per day of NOx. And we're talking about 0.75 pounds a day from this variance order. And for ROC, it's 37.4. So yeah, it's a very small slice of the pie.
But it would seem like if that if the petitioner had access to that information, that they could articulate it better in their petition, how little this really means.
Yes. We generally, I don't want to pass the buck, it's up to the petitioner to make their case and to plead their case. When the doctor brought up that question, that caused me to look at this. He basically looked at the petition and said, this doesn't really answer the question, which was correct. And so we were able to get a better answer for you. But yeah, we do try to help people. We do try to tell them how they need to fill it out. And I think if we can, maybe I'll hang on to these numbers so we can use them anytime we have a hearing, or so we can basically refer to the matter at hand. What does that look like compared to the NOx from everything in the entire county. And yeah, like I say, it is a pretty small number.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any other members of the board have any questions of the district at this time? Mr. Herlock.
Yes, well, this isn't this question as much as a comment, and it's really if there's any input from either the petitioner or the district. I would like to see us add in page 7 the response to this same question that I was concerned about, which is starts on page 6, number 3. It's one of the findings we have to make is that closing the business or taking the property would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. And then the text on page 7 is part of the response to that says the emissions averaging 0.75 pounds per day. I would propose we add something that says, and this is a very minuscule fraction of the total county inventory.
That's item number 5 on page 7 of the order?
No, on item number 3
Starts on 6.
starts on 6. It says closing the business or taking the property would be without a corresponding
It
benefit.
starts on 7, excuse me.
No, well,
Yes, we can.
and then the response is, it talks about the permit and the quantities, and ends in the second paragraph by saying emissions averaging 0.75 pounds per day and totaling 22.51 pounds per month. And part of our finding is that this is an extremely small, minuscule fraction of the county inventory of NOx, and therefore we make the finding.
We can add a sentence in there that kind of explains that it's a very small part of the county's total inventory.
Yeah, I think that's really what the board needs to know in order to make this finding, is that it's a small fraction, not just necessarily the numbers, because we don't have the inventory
Right.
at our disposal all the time.
Yeah, we're looking at at worst case, maybe a pound a day versus 43 tons a day.
For the period that we're going to grant them the variance to make the final fix.
Yeah, for 3 months.
Yeah. Mr. Carmen?
I have a question of curiosity more than anything else. Is on a flare that's operating, to lower the heat on it, can you add a little bit more air into the pilot gas, or is any agent that you can add to the gas to make a cooler combustion, and it will operate that way until you do all your repairs?
Currently, we have louver control that does control the amount of air that gets mixed in to cool the combustion temperature. And we use the louvers, as we can. But we do have to stay above 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. And so we use the louvers until we approach that threshold. And then we can't use that aspect anymore. To cool the flame even more, we need an inert gas, and that's CO2, that we'll get as we increase the tail gas production.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions of the board, do the petitioners have any questions of the district?
I do not, and I haven't prepared any, but I think we don't
Back
have
to the
any.
board, no further questions? Everybody's satisfied? Does the district have any more questions?
Well, I just wanted to state, we do feel that we need to add another, we need to add another increment to the order.
With respect to the NOx?
Well, basically, there's a deadline that they have to comply by September 15th, and we feel like we need to add an increment that basically that requires that if they don't think they're going to meet that increment, that they submit another petition.
So,
And they would probably, it would be a regular variance. They would have to submit a petition to modify this order by July 31st, given the fact that it's a regular variance and it's a 30-day notice time.
well, in that case, I have a question of Mr. Oriana, counsel for the board. Can we make a decision on whether to grant the variance without that information?
The limitation is how long the regular variance can be. So whatever you grant could not result in exceeding the total length of what you could grant today for a regular variance. So I'd have to calculate that, which I don't have in front of me. I might have it.
I thought I heard Mr. Searcy say that he'd like to add another increment of progress before the last one that says they have to tell the district if they're not going to make the September 15th deadline.
Right.
I don't think it changes to September
No.
15th.
No, it doesn't change that date, but it's just, if it looks like you're not going to make it, then
Yeah.
we're gonna have to come back and see if we can modify the
We usually see that, and it's not here, probably should be.
Yeah, that's something that we should have had on the order.
But it's clear what the sentence he's proposing to add is, and we can vote to add, to approve or disapprove with that included in it.
That's correct, and the only issue would be if that happens, how long you could grant another regular variance for. If they didn't meet the deadline, I thought that was the district's point.
No, that isn't what he said.
I don't think so,
Oh, okay, so I misunderstood.
unless we misunderstood.
I think he's asking that they need to submit a petition for another hearing,
Right.
and then that variance would continue as required.
When we looked at the dates, we feel like there's enough extra time built into the order that they shouldn't have any problem. But if a manufacturer has a problem and can't get the part, or the manufacturer fabricates something and it's not right, or some of the lead times can be several weeks, and if something that's out of the ordinary happens, it's possible, not very probable, but possible that they may not be able to meet that date, and they ought to they're required to have the fabrication done by the end of July, so they should know by then whether they're going to be able to meet that date. I do know that we've had orders in the past where we have had a similar condition where basically if it looks like there's an unforeseen problem, then by such and such a date, then you need to let the district know, basically. And then what we would suggest they do would be to come back to the board to see if we can modify this.
Okay, well, hearing that, my final question, do any members of the public have any questions or wish to make a statement at this time? Okay, well then I'm going to declare this hearing closed. Board members, would anyone like to make a motion?
I move we we accept the petition as written, as well as modified by a modification that I suggested and that Mr. Searcy suggested with regard to the NOx being a small fraction of the county inventory, and that another increment of progress be added before the end.
Anyone else?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Is everybody happy with that? Clerk of the board, would you like to call the roll?
Board Member Bonsbach,
Aye.
Board Member Murphy,
Aye.
Board Member Stubblefield,
Aye.
Board Member Herlock,
Aye.
and Board Member Carmen.
Motion passes. Hearing is granted. Thank you.